this is Kimberlea, and Yoga Snack is our bite-sized podcast where Robbie and I serve up nourishing discussions on yoga, astrology, nourishment, and mindset.
We mix wisdom with personal experiences to serve up quick, insightful conversations that nourish your practice and add flavor to your daily life.
Ready for a quick bite of wisdom? Let's dig in. Welcome to Yoga Snack. Today we're going to continue our discussion around the yamas of yoga, and this time it's the second yama. Robbie, you want to tell us what that is?
So this one is Satya. This is truthfulness, and this is a tough one. We thought that non-harming was tough. You get to this one. This one is I think equally tough to stay in line with.
Yeah. I think this is so interesting because of truth. And what does that actually mean? Because we all have, perceptions in the world. So it's tricky. So without practice, right, or practices, it's the fact that we're not examining our truth, where I think that's what starts to create obstacles on our path and potentially create suffering. So let's talk about this in our own physical practice first. So what does being truthful in your own asana practice mean for you?
I think right away, my mind goes to being truthful about where you actually are on any given day, because that can change from day to day. I think not like forcing yourself into different positions that you're not ready for that day, like, or you're not open to. I think that that's the obvious one right off the top of my head.
Because our body has an intelligence. I like to think our bodies are a truth keeper. They just don't always have words.
Yeah. And I don't know, I think we talked a little bit earlier, but I think like you said, your body always sort of knows what is truthful and what isn't. And it might have a different way of showing you than it shows me. Me personally, I feel like anytime something that is, doesn't feel like truth, I always feel it in my gut first. That seems to be where it creeps in, just butterfly action in there. And
that's actually our enteric nervous system. And what they've found is that there is an intelligence. So there's like neurons in our guts, and there's hormones and chemicals that are created, like serotonin is that contentment molecule. And that, most of it, I believe, I could be wrong, but it's high. It's something like 80% of our serotonin is actually created in our guts. That's our contentment molecule, right? And when we're not being honest with ourselves, there's this incongruency that our body is working against. And I think that that's really interesting. I think many people feel dishonesty or incongruency in their life, whether it's receiving it from somebody else, right? Or we're imposing it internally on ourselves. Like, we tell ourselves something that we know is not true, or we don't believe it, or we're force feeding ourselves it, and it shows up in our guts.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. As far as like other ways on the mat where truthfulness, I think you can start to show up against this. I think, as a teacher, we just went through a big election and to show up on the mat after that and to speak truth is not easy. and anytime we're going through these like big collective issues, I think it just um, puts a little bit more weight on what is said, and I think you really have to tune into what is truthful and
Mhm.
to not mislead in any way, or to um, I guess try to like impart the way you feel about things onto other people. Like, it's just that's where even in the last week, I feel like, that's something that I've come up against, is like
Mhm.
what is true for me isn't true for everybody who's sitting in that class.
Mhm. But it's still valid, right? And to validate what's true for us too. And that's, I think, where it gets a little saucy, because if we're not examining our 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 beliefs, then um, those are sticky points. That's shadow stuff, and it doesn't mean we have to constantly change our mind, but um, there are places where if we're not examining what's true and real, we just put our head down and go with the flow, and that's even, I mean, science is always changing its freaking mind, right? What was true about like fat in the 90s around like eating fat, and it's like fat's the enemy, zero fat. And, because there was all this research done, right, that was saying something. But, I mean, one great thing about science is they're re-examining things constantly. But what's true and real is constantly shifting and changing. And that's even, in our own lives, our own cycles, our own pulsations of the way that we are in the world. And even like inside of relationships, like what's true and real at one point in our relationships can shift and change. Um, but I do think our body is a truth keeper. And if you have practice or a relationship that's asking you to go in and examine things inside of our bodies, that we have a source of wisdom and like a divining rod a little bit more, around what's true and real. Because if we're not paying attention, we're just going to go on autopilot and um, probably contribute to our own suffering more than we need to, right? Because we're going to do that anyways at some level. Um, I know too, like for you, you've had a big shift, especially after psychedelics, right? Like what was true for you prior to those experiences versus what's true to you now, seems to be dramatically different. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah. Um, I think psychedelics kind of gave me this glimpse into um, a different way of how I wanted to live my life. Like, before psychedelics, um, I was slowly closing off to like participating in my life. It was show up, clock in, do the thing, go home, dinner, probably some drinks,
Check
and
out.
that repetitive cycle. And I think it was just like accepting um like my own personal call to adventure is
Mm.
how psychedelics sort of like reshaped my mind. And like, instead of just like accepting um that the life that I had been living, I started to think, how can I be the most fulfilled in my life?
Mhm.
And I didn't have answers right away. It's taken years to try to figure out what exactly that might be to fill me up in that way. And it's
Mhm.
changed. The truth of that question has changed uh, numerous times since psychedelics came into my life, and I feel like it's just going to keep changing.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah,
like
I
it.
think that's the nature of life, right? Is
Yeah.
change. Like anytime we're seeking, something that is still and stagnant. Life can't exist in that realm. But I think that, maybe the practice of yoga, the structure of yoga, there's some underlying organizing principles that we can look at as being helpful to guiding us around like what is true. And what is true is that everything changes.
Yeah.
Right? As annoying as that is, like that's true and real. Like for life to exist, things have to change. Because if your heart just contracted and didn't expand, you wouldn't have a heartbeat. And those changes, are evident inside of the way that life exists right now. And so there are, I think, some really in a lot of traditions, some underlying truths that we can seek out and look at, but they're like guideposts, right? They're not specifics. And what happens is we get so um, attached to belief systems, or we get so attached to the answer, right? That we don't realize that really living is about living in the questions that we're not always going to get answers to. But even just asking and posing questions and living inside of questions is really a rich way um, to be in life. I think even like going back to parenting, what I really felt was like foundational way of like being a good parent. I put quotes up in that. My view on that has changed dramatically. I've been a parent for 27 years. And what I thought was a good parent back, 20 some odd years ago is entirely different. I have a different perspective. Life has changed me, and I've received this experience of trying to guide and raise, other human beings. And it's really humbled me, and allowed me to shift um, the way that I see, to be a parent and to show up in life. And of course, that's going to change too. Like when you have tiny people and toddlers and elementary age, and all of that's going to shift and change as well. But yeah, I think um, truth is fluid and it shifts with us as we shift. Because if we're going to stick our heels, if we're going to dig our heels in and be like, this is it, this is all that's true and real, and we know it's such a limited way of being in the world. Um, Heard somebody say just this last week, just because you don't understand something doesn't mean it's wrong.
Hmm. It's a good
And
reminder right now.
yeah, isn't that interesting? Like on so many levels, like if we would just like embrace that more globally,
Hmm.
just because you don't understand something doesn't mean it's wrong. But when we have really limited belief systems, right, we dig our heels in and we stop getting curious about what it means to be human. That's one of the things I've said for years and years. Like there's so many ways to be human. And if we don't make room for that, right, we're really getting very condensed in like this is the only way to exist on this planet. And I don't know that that's helpful, or that's really not anything I want to be a part of. Um, but there are guideposts that we need to follow as well so that we can continue to move on this planet in a constructive way, right? And that's what I think is really interesting, and that we should be examining that consistently. One of the things, I think around politically correct speech, um, I think people have felt really limited, and that by trying to be politically correct, it didn't change their hearts, it just changed their words, and it created a lot of resentment. And that's what I think is swelling up right now is that resentment, and they weren't being true to who they actually were because they were just changing their words and not changing their hearts or their beliefs. And that resentment has really boiled up and kind of festered. And that's what I'm feeling right now. in the world is like people wanted to be who they were and they couldn't, um, in a really interesting way, right? Because we have other fringe groups and minorities and people that just want to be who they are. So it goes both ways in a really interesting, dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. And back in teacher training, the book that we studied, the Yamas and Niyamas, um, there's something in that book that basically is like, she talks about like being in a room with um, people who she knows from different avenues, and
Mm.
um, not knowing who to be in that room. Like her
Right.
biggest fear is to be in a room and not with different people and not know which version of herself to be.
Mm.
And that like has really stuck out in my head as like, oh, that's what happens when you're not your authentic self, is that eventually
Mhm.
um, all these characters that you've concocted for yourself, they catch up with you.
Right.
And then you gotta speak to them. Like, why?
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was like an episode of Friends where one of the characters had like a British accent around a certain group of people. And that's sort of what's playing in my head right now.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I think she also talks in that section, if I remember right, about the difference between being nice and being kind.
Mm, yeah.
That nice is this surface layer, the surface version of of saying what people want to hear and editing yourself on the surface. Um, and that kindness is actually such a deeper practice. And that kind isn't always being nice to people. It's like saying the hard thing, calling people out sometimes. I had a conversation with my mom today and I was like, I think that's a cop out, mom.
Mm,
We were talking about something and I was just like, I think that's a cop out. I think you're not looking close enough, or I think you're, X, Y, and Z. And I have a very honest relationship with my mom and I can say things, but here's where we bring all the yamas, back to that original yama. I'm not doing it to be hurtful and harmful. I'm doing it to actually, um, you know, uphold my mom in a way that I think she deserves to be upheld in her life. And that's one of the things, because it's like, oh, truth? Oh, you want truth? Let me dish you out some truth, sucker. And you start to like tear people down,
yeah.
right? And roast them. And the thing is that we have to defer back to the first Yama. If you're just going to cut people down with the truth, right, that's a limited understanding of the system that we're going to always default back to the first one. And you have to understand, like, where is that truth coming from? From your shortages and limitations and your lack of self esteem or your need to, feel superior to someone, right? And that's what I think is really another layer to this is some people get off on like hearing people just slam other people.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's not necessarily appropriate,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know?
and I can see where that comes from because I'm definitely the type of person who, if I'm not, practicing and really making it a point to let my truth be told, um, hold on to it and I let it fester. And
Mhm.
then by the time it does comes out, like a blade
Mhm.
and just cuts
Right. Yeah.
cuts everything down. It's like here comes my truth. It's not anybody's fault that I hold it back.
Yeah.
Um, that's sort of I see it happen because it's something that I do.
Yeah. And it's not about being perfect at any of this, right? It's about progress. It's about looking at the things that we have tendencies towards and we practice doing something a little differently, right? And that's where our yoga practice comes in is, maybe on the mat, we're looking at like what our tendencies are. Um, and that's one thing in class that I really insist a lot of times when I'm teaching. Like I taught last night and we were coming into half moon and I'm like, make sure your toes are forward. And then I'm just like, everybody look down at your right foot and notice the tendency is to turn the toes in here for a lot of you. And it's not like I'm calling them out to be an asshole, but I'm just like, pay attention. Look at what's true and real in this moment. And can you intervene? Can you shore yourself up and right yourself in a way that you are clear with what you're actually doing versus what you thought you were doing, right? Or what we kind of go on autopilot and we become really performative in our yoga asana practice and it's more important to balance on one foot than it is to like pay attention to your foundation, which I find it's all just symbolic and in a really beautiful metaphor. It's not about like getting it right, right? On the outside, it's like, can we get it right on the inside?
Right.
And our body is this beautiful truth teller that we can utilize as an instrument, and we can start to fine tune the instrument of the body and use that as a vehicle of awareness. So truth is hard.
Oh
Truth is
yeah.
hard. And it's like knowing, especially with our words, like when to intervene. Do you know the four gates of speech? Do you know that method?
Let's see. Is it helpful? Um, no, I don't know.
No, that's okay. That's okay. That's all right. I was going to give you a chance to. So, is it kind? Is the first gate. So this method, gosh, I don't know what tradition it comes from. I want to say it's a South American tradition, maybe like a shamanic tradition. Um, but it's like these gates that before the words leave your mouth, they come up to like a gatekeeper and you have to answer these questions. And there's four gates that it has to pass through before it comes out of your mouth. Can you kind of visualize that? So the
Yeah.
first one is it kind? Is it, and it's like, oh, yeah, okay. Is it truthful? And we talked about kind, right? Not nice. We're not talking about nice. Is it kind? Okay, well, you can enter the next gate. Is it truthful? And then is it necessary?
Oh.
And then is the timing appropriate? Those are the four gates of speech.
Mm.
That might be a really good thing to leave our listeners with today, and even ourselves. Like, how can I shore up my language and still be truthful? Right. But it's also the appropriateness of it because, we've had people who just like, oh my God, like I go to the gym and there's this guy who's like, I'm just like, shut up. Can we stop talking about this here? That it's not appropriate. The timing is not appropriate. Like we're here to work out. I'm not here to listen to your core values and beliefs on your religion and your political stances. Right. I'm here to actually work out. So I have my four gates of speech, my friend. And so if we could just, be a little more aware of that in our lives, but it's also making sure that we're not holding back and suppressing it, that we are finding opportunities, to intervene and interject and to be truthful. And that's also, I think, speaking up in situations that are really
Yeah. Truth isn't easy.
Gosh, I know. Remember I said like these are like a little bit of a hierarchy. It's like if you could just be Himza,
Mhm.
if you just get that right, that's really hard. So we're gonna do truth, but truth is really hard too. So
Yeah, I feel
we're
like they're
gonna
holding hands.
yes. Yes, that's a great thing. Yeah, they're like holding hands for sure. So let's leave that with everybody today as their contemplation for the week and the four gates of speech. Is it kind? Not nice, right? Not that surface level. Oh, bless her heart. I come from the South, so I'm just like so over that saying. Um, is it kind? Is it truthful? And it may be true for you, right? And that's still valid and appropriate and necessary. So is it kind? Is it truthful? Is it necessary? And is the timing appropriate? Love to explore that this week with you guys. And anything else? Is there a baking term of truing something? Am I making
Um, maybe proofing
proving?
is
That's
it's
what it is.
closest. Yeah,
Maybe that's it.
and the British, well, they'll say it like proving, like it's got to
Oh,
prove, and so a little like a V instead of an F.
okay.
And
Okay.
I don't know. I I picked it up in Great British Baking.
Okay, okay, yeah, prove or prove it. And, that's, I think it shows up even there. It's like we need to give things time to rest and rise to the surface so then we can do something meaningful with it, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So there we go. There's our food. Um, all right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We really are enjoying exploring all this with you, and we'd love to know what you want to learn more about. And anything else, Robbie?
Nope. Just happy you're all here listening.
All right.
See you
See you
next
next
time.
time.